Hey everyone, I'm sitting down here with our elder, Mr. Barry Bedford, and today we're going to talk about his time in law enforcement on the police force. The idea behind these interviews is to find people who have a particular area of expertise and experience and to just have them speak into that and how their Christian faith has informed that particular area of work. And this is a particular area that I think is often gets misunderstood, misconstrued, underappreciated, and all kinds of things. But um, Barry has served this community in the Iowa City area, Coralville specifically, for a long, long time as a police chief. So, again, how long were you in law enforcement?
I was in law enforcement for 44 years, and 30 of that was as chief, but I also worked the street and worked the investigations before being chief.
Okay. And what originally drew you into getting involved in that work? Because that's an area of work that I think a lot of people aren't naturally drawn to. But what was it that made you want to get into that?
Well, I always had a desire to help people. And in fact, I went into, at the university, my major was pre-med, and I wanted to be a doctor so I could, quote, help people. Um, I came face to face with reality with some of the chemistry courses and realized that that might not be where I end up. And I was involved in a fraternity, and these were my pre-Christian days. But one of my fraternity brothers, older ones, really wanted to go in law enforcement, and because my focus was not necessarily right back then, I partied a lot and didn't study much. Uh, I thought, well, maybe I'll just take a nice, easy class and take a sociology major, within which there was several courses on criminology and law and things like that, and I got very interested in that. And this brother wanted to be a police officer, and so we talked about it, and then he got on with Boise, Idaho Police Department. I came out and rode with him, and I said, "This is for me." Again, wasn't a Christian at the time, but that's where my initial thing was. Um, so that's how I first got interested in it.
Okay, so you became a Christian after the fact, and when you did, how did your Christian faith and your Christian worldview impact the work that you did?
I became a Christian in 1972, but I graduated earlier in '72, so it was right fairly shortly after. And my my fiance at the time was a newer Christian, and said, well, you can't be a police officer because you're carrying a gun, and you might have to kill somebody. And I was really concerned about that. So I went to one of my people who were discipling me, and we talked about it, and we found that in the Bible, that Romans 13 specifically, that and at that time they had the Living Translation, New Living Translation. It wasn't translation, I'm sorry, New Living Bible, and it was a paraphrase. Talked about the police officer is appointed by God to do this and that. So that kind of cleared the way, and I really believed, I really did. We prayed about it a lot. I really believed that it was a calling, and I still believe that that work is a calling.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to get involved in that. And then I got on with Coralville in 1973 as a reserve, in 1974 as full-time, and as you said, 44 years there. So
Okay. So that was something that you had to think through kind of early on as you were getting into it and as a brand new Christian.
Yep.
And that's an issue that we can address a little bit later on here. But like as you progressed in your work and as time went on, how did your Christian faith apply? Like how did you apply that to what you were doing, sort of like on a regular basis? or on an ongoing basis?
Well, you know, my faith was new. I was excited about it. I read the Bible a lot and learned a lot, and so it did affect my work because when I got out there, I really viewed people as created in the image of God. And I tried to be fair and realize that how I treated people, I'd be judged by because I felt God had called me to this. So therefore, I was responding to what He wanted me to do in this situation. Um, I'm a sinner like everyone else, and there are times when I didn't always follow the highest standards, but I really tried to. And I tried to build relationships with people and treat them with honor and respect, even when, in fact, one was when a person had just murdered his girlfriend.
Man.
And I treated him with respect, and we went through the things, and eventually when we had our interview with him, and this was after a little bit, at least some significant investigation, uh, he fully admitted everything, and he said so because that he didn't feel hostility from me, and his attorney even said that he was grateful that I treated him in a respectful manner, and I don't think his initial intent was to kill his girlfriend, but it was anger and it was a fight, and she died, and so it was one of those things where I tried to do that because that reflected what I believed that part of that calling was to to do what is necessary um, in society to support that God wants, but also the fact to do so in a righteous way that I didn't hit people, beat people, or whatever, and tried to treat everyone in a way that was the same for everybody, whether I liked them or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we were talking a little bit earlier how when you're in this work or in that line of work, you see a lot of sin. You see depravity kind of put on full display, and yeah, I think when you understand or when you have a worldview that can make sense of sin and the fact that it doesn't just apply to these really bad people here, it affects all of us. Um, would you say that sort of had a humbling effect on how you would deal with people?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, even when I was trying to do a good job, once in a while, um, and I'm not justifying it at all, but I would snap at people. I would uh, be sometimes sarcastic, frustrated. Those emotions would show. But ultimately, I did see things, as you just mentioned, that nobody should have to see. And but did and because do it part of the investigations, participate in autopsies, and see things that normal people don't see, and it really almost sears your conscience from the standpoint, not the conscience, maybe not, but the idea that you see things that become so standardized that you don't have the emotions following it. You protect yourself by shielding yourself from the emotions, and you see things that are bad and bad and bad and bad, and you can become very cynical, and you can become angry about it. Um, by God's grace, I didn't become angry because I could pray about it, and I could say, well, this struggle, this bothers me, and so I tried not to make it personal. And I tried to people, like I say, treat everyone with respect, and whether I liked them or not. But they had to be held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, and you've probably already made mention of this in different ways, but just to sort of flip this around, first I asked, how did your faith impact your work? To flip it around, how did being involved in this work for so long impact your faith and your relationship with Christ?
Well, I think, as you said, uh, people in that line of business do see the underbelly of society.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to become cynical. Um, I could be cynical in some ways. I mean, my wife still says, you always think of the worst that could happen, but the reason I think of that is that I want to be prepared with contingency plans, which I did for all that time, always anticipating how to respond in an emergency. On the other hand, you can get so cynical that you don't trust anybody, you don't respect anybody, everyone's out for themselves. You can have that negative input. I like to think that my relationship with Christ was deepened because of what I saw, and I didn't want those responses to be in my life. I wanted to still, like I say, treat people with respect. Uh, Murder, assaults, domestic abuse, a whole bunch of types of robberies and things like that, which could be very vicious. I didn't put my arm around him and say, "You're just a really great guy," but I didn't yell at him, scream at him, threaten him, bounce him around, or anything like that either. And it's because I had a good relationship with Jesus. I tried to have my quiet time daily. I tried to take my frustrations from work to Him, and not go to the gym and beat up the punching bag or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it strengthened my relationship with Christ, but by that relationship with Christ strengthened my ability to do my job.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really matter what line of work you're in. As a believer, we stand out, or at least you're supposed to stand out. What do you think are some specific ways that being a believer on the police force made you stand out as a police officer?
Well, working in the police department, the city hires you to do law enforcement. They don't hire you to proselytize and try and bring people into your faith. But hopefully, if you do your job right, there's going to be some positives, and maybe that could happen after the event's over. I found that in my job, I had officers come to me who also were Christian and struggling with that identity because there's a balance. If I wore my Christian beliefs and everything on my sleeve, and everybody knew, well, this guy is a conservative Christian. Do they think they're going to feel like I'm treating them fairly if they're coming from a radical or atheist type of view? So we had to be careful that we were neutral on everything. That's part of the respecting people where they're coming from, at least, and saying, okay, I may disagree, but let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with the officers, it was difficult for them because, they didn't. There's a culture there too,
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's the military or police or whatever, and it's a rough culture. And whether it's the jokes in the room, it's the people we're dealing with, what you have to hear and say. I mean, I have said some really profane things on the witness stand because I'm being ordered by the judge to quote what was said by the other people.
Right.
And every time it bothered me. But at the same time, I would have officers come in and they're saying, I need you to pray with me about this. I need you to help me with this. And many of them were Christians, but they didn't come out as Christians, at least at work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knew them closely, that was one thing. But they balanced it in their way. And a lot of times, I would say that the other people on the department had no idea where they were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I think most people had an idea, strong idea,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not, bring someone in my office and start to work on them like that. Yeah. I just felt that wasn't what my job was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a line of work that obviously comes with a lot of challenges. I mean, we would sit here for probably hours if you were to list all the challenges.
You got a lot of stories.
I'm sure you do, right? But what are a few of the challenges that really stand out in that line of work, and also what might be some encouraging aspects of it?
Well, the challenges can be what the people, the expectations of it's political work, like it or not. You're working for a government agency, and there's politics involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to uh, you're working for the public. They have expectations of how they want to be treated and how they want you to treat people. Um, and then you're also dealing with some people who society looks at are vicious and violent and totally worthless people out there that should be in jail or incarcerated or punished or whatever in some way. And you know, we need to look at this, and this is my belief, and again, I think from a Christian standpoint, that these are all people, and I don't make excuses for them, but I can see, factors in their lives which might have helped to bring them to that point. I can see the fact that they've been deceived in many ways, and their belief system's wrong. It's not my job to change that, but I think in my relationship with them and dealing with them, I can recognize that that's a factor. And so instead of taking out my personal views on the action they did, I try and find out where they're coming from. And obviously, I was trying to also uh, build my case and be sure that I'm right in the fact of whether they've committed something, and then take it from there. I wasn't trying to take advantage of it, but I was trying to treat them with respect and all that. So there are some good things. There's some bad things about it. Uh, the encouraging thing is that when you do something right, people are grateful at times. Um, I think I mentioned to you a little bit earlier that um, when people have contact with the police, it's usually not a positive contact. Either that the police are giving you a ticket or something, or else they're there because you're a victim.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're the firemen who come and put out the fire and protect you and rescue you. We're the guys that come and give you tickets, cost you money, or else you've just been robbed or burglarized, and then if we're not able to get that stuff back or arrest the people, then we didn't do any good. So that's difficult on the job too. And again, I told you before that although there are a lot of people who are grateful for what we do, there's also a negative aspect to it also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, part of that, and you mentioned this earlier on about violence. As a cop, you have to carry a gun. There are times where you have to use force. And I can understand how a Christian in particular would struggle with that, right? Because we're supposed to turn the other cheek to people. We're supposed to love our neighbors. We're supposed to love our enemies. So, as a Christian, coming from a Christian worldview, what would you say is a biblical understanding of a righteous use of force and violence?
Well, I like the use of force part of it. I don't know. Violence, it depends on how you want to interpret or
Sure.
but I think that first of all, from a use of force standpoint, let's be honest. Whether you're in the military or police work, there's going to be situations where force needs to be used for some legitimate purpose. That might be controlling someone who's out of control, that wants to hurt someone, and you're trying to take them into custody or protect someone else. There's self-defense for police officers as well as there is for private citizens,
Mm-hmm.
and legally that can be justified. However, on both levels, that we should never condone using more force than is absolutely necessary to control a situation. Um, Seeing the bad police officers nightsticks and beating the tar out of somebody because they didn't like them or they didn't. That's overuse, no doubt about it. The fact that somebody is assaulting someone else and you have to go over and pull them off and maybe get in an altercation, a physical fight with them, and use the force necessary to control them, to stop the potential injury or damage, and then take them into custody is I think a righteous use of force. Biblically, Nehemiah, when he went back to the Jerusalem to rebuild the walls, put watchmen on the walls, and told them that they bear their sword, and in fact told those watchmen that if the enemy comes, you're expected to not only give the alarm but to defend, and to use that force to defend yourselves and the people there. Like I mentioned before, Romans 13 specifically talks about, and like I said, in the Living Bible it said police officers. Other translations said centurions. Others say authorities. But it all says that they were appointed by God to punish the wrongdoers, and under the authority of the officials that God put in place for His purpose. And so I think that right there, if you're going to punish, be involved with punishing, it's not because of I think I don't like what you're doing. It's the fact that there is authority there. There's laws. There's standards that have to be upheld and enforced. And in those situations, if force, I think, is justified, although again, minimal force necessary, and too often times there are times when emotions get involved and gets carried away, and it's wrong use of force.
Yeah. So that might be a good lead into this last question I have here. Say a young Christian comes to you and tells you that he's interested in becoming a cop. What advice or counsel would you give to somebody like that?
Well, first thing I'd want to do, and I've had this happen. In fact, I did it regularly. Everybody I hired, I sat down with and talked to them about what their expectations were of the job and because a lot of times it's totally unrealistic. But I also sat down with their spouse or their significant other and made sure they understood of the many of the drawbacks of being married to a police officer, and some of the problems that that's going to entail. Police officers had one of the highest divorce rates and highest suicide rates in many of the professions. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong. People get angry because of what they've had to put up with or do it, and then they take it out at home. So I would encourage people to do it, but with the understanding that they understood and their spouse understood the potential negatives. And like I say, there's a lot of people in the military and police who suffer from PTSD. And well, also fire and EMS, there's PTSD there. Again, because you have to see and do things that normal people don't have to. I have counseled people to not go into law enforcement because they weren't sure that they wanted to do that after talking to them. But those that I think that are capable, especially, and if they're Christian, that's even a better thing, I believe. And they have the support of their family and their spouse. I think that's something I would recommend to people. I think it's a righteous occupation. I think it is a calling. I do believe it's a calling, God calling people to do it. And if He's not calling you, then it's not a whole bunch of fun all the time. And like I say, you work. There's times I've literally, when I was doing investigations, there might have been times when I was up for 36, 48 hours straight because of where the evidence was and the investigation was taken. And that means I'm not home. I'm not there when the wife needs help with the kids, or she's going to work and someone has to watch the kids. And I had my very young son I had tickets to the Iowa game, basketball game one night, right behind the team, and he was so excited. And it wasn't 10 minutes into the game that I got called out to go to a burglary investigation, and all the way up the stairs of Carver and all the way to the car, he was crying. And, it was tearing me up, but I had to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those types of things.
Yeah.
So I try to explain those types of drawbacks, and at the same time talk about the ways you can feel really good when you help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing. I want to help somebody.
Right.
And so I think it's a good way to do it, but there is a balance.
So I think you're absolutely right that it is a calling. You're doing God ordained work. How might someone discern whether or not God is calling them into that? What might be some things to look for?
Well, I think that they need to be honest, and if they're married, they ought to be talking with their spouse about um, why they want to go into this. Maybe they're military police. Maybe they're action junkies. You know, they want to get out there, and maybe they just like fighting with people. I mean, I've had all those types of people. Maybe they just want to carry a gun, which is scary because the last thing you want to have to do, and you had to be prepared to do, but the last thing you want to have to do is to use that weapon in a way that could kill somebody. So you've got to kind of work through that. Why? What are the motivations? Why do you want to do it? Is it truly to help people, or is it to assert your authority over people, to be the controlling factor? That's not a good reason.
Okay.
And I think that we need to be honest with ourselves. And actually, I would suggest that you talk to somebody you trust and somebody who knows you well, and tell them what you want to do and why you want to do it, and listen to their response.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, Barry, you have contributed a lot of value not only to this church but to this community at large. And we really appreciate the service that you have given to this community for a very long time. And I'm sure people watching are going to appreciate the wisdom that you have gathered over the years. And hopefully it'll bless people. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. All right. See you later, guys.